Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch. Max Ivy is known worldwide as a blind blogger. He is a totally blind man from Houston, Texas, who has transformed himself from a morbidly obese failed carnival owner to a respected music equipment broker in the best health of his life. He had to learn so much, including hand-coding his first website in HTML, recruiting clients, setting fees, recording videos, using social media networks, building an email list, etc. People told him how inspiring his story was and encouraged him to share more about what it's like to be an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. That led to a second website, free self-help books, and a podcast called The What's Your Excuse Show. This grew out of the fact that many people have said that if Max can do it, then what's my excuse? Max loves to help others achieve their own goals and dreams. And if you have any questions for him, no matter how delicate, just ask. He'll answer with the honesty, humor, and grace he is known for. Please welcome Max Ivy.
You understand? I feel like the elephant in the room sometimes. I'm just going to stand here. Is that okay with y'all? All right, good. My name is Maxwell Ivy, and I am known around the world as the blind blogger. And I want you to ask yourselves, why would I be known as the blind blogger? Because whether you know it or not, there are lots of visually impaired people out there with blogs, podcasts, online businesses, and authors. Well, the reason I have the name is because I was out there putting my work online, sharing my butt off, going to forums, social media sites, sharing with friends and family, leaving comments. Even though I knew that my work wasn't the best, that I'm not the most talented blind author, I'm not the most prolific, I'm not even the most consistent. But I am the one that when it came time to start a second website to share these stories, people online said, Max, we've been calling you the blind blogger for 2 years. It's about time you accepted it and went on about it. So that's, the reason I share that is because I believe that there are people either here in the room or who will watch this later who have said they want to start a website or a blog, but they haven't even filed for the domain number. Or they have the domain, but their website is still in that part where you edit it, but it doesn't go live. Or you have your site go live yet, but you haven't published that first bit of content. And those of you who have content, you're not as consistent as you would like to be. And for most people, the reason for that is because they are afraid that their stuff isn't good enough. That people don't want to hear what they have to say. Their website isn't pretty enough, functional enough, that people are going to be disappointed if they come to their website and see what they're up to. And most people, instead of just going ahead and accepting that pretty good today is better than perfect tomorrow, next week, next month, or that mythical day of someday, most people, that's what they do. They wait. They stall. They think if I just learn one more thing, or if I just meet one more person, or if I buy that next theme or something, I'll be good enough. It'll be time to publish. And so my goal here today is hopefully to encourage anybody that's in one of those stages to just press send, to finally decide that I'm going to put my work out there. I'm going to share my story in my own voice and let the rest of it take care of itself. And for those of y'all who don't know, I just finally got over my cold this morning, so I'm doing my best up here, y'all. Last night I couldn't even talk to the taxi driver. But to emphasize my point, I want to share a story about my first website. It was called the Midway Marketplace. Well, it's still the Midway Marketplace. It's just not my primary focus anymore, because now I'm more into blogging and podcasting. But in 2007, I decided I was no longer going to halfway it. I was going to see if I couldn't turn selling other people's used amusement equipment into a full-time profession. Man, was that a mistake. I had no idea how much I didn't know. I really was a babe in the woods. I had no idea what HTML, PHP, or Java were. And I only had a very loose idea of what a website was or how I would start one. This was before Facebook, before Wi-Fi, and really before people even knew what WordPress was. And at that time, I knew I needed a website because everybody said I had to have one, but I didn't know how to build one. So first, I did what I usually do. I asked people I know if one of them knew how to build a website. And nobody did, but I have a brother, Michael, in Florida. And he's one of these people, he has an extra gene, so he can figure out technical stuff and make it make sense. He's blessed that way, I'm not. He figured out how to build a simple website with 3 pages, a home page, and an About Me page, and a page for equipment listings. And he found a plugin, I don't think they called them plugins then, I think they were called scripts, from SourceForge that would allow me to add new listings to the website without knowing anything about how it all worked. But then Michael got a good paying job. He didn't have time for me no more. I didn't have the money to hire a webmaster, and I wouldn't have had the courage or the faith to turn the keys to my car over to somebody I didn't even know. So even if I'd had the money, I wouldn't have done it. I had to figure out a way to maintain and even build my site because I wasn't happy with the way it was. I wanted it to grow. I'm funny that way. I'm always looking at the future and the possibilities and what we can do to improve things. So Michael told me, go online and start visiting some of the forums, and I did that. And eventually people in the forum said, Max, would you please stop asking all these stupid questions and go over to W3C org and go through their tutorials. And after you go through the tutorials, then you can come back and ask us questions, because then you'll know a little something. So I went over there and I did the basics, the home page, links, embedding video, photos, putting email links, and felt like I was doing pretty good until it got to picking my colors. Because when you pick colors, and I'm sure most of y'all know this, but I don't know if people watching know this, you have 2 choices. You can go with the hexadecimal, well, whatever that word is, numbers, or you can go with the names. And since I had no way of knowing what number went with what color, and I only remember 24 colors in my coloring box back when I could see them, I decided I'd go with names. So I picked yellow for the background because when I could still see, the stuffed animals on the middle would always look better on yellow than they did on white. I picked blue for the text, red for the links, and orange for the previously clicked links. Well, imagine my surprise when I found out from some of my website visitors that the yellow was an ice creaming yellow, the red was brick, the blue was navy, and the orange was something fluorescent, like out of a neon sign from a bar. This site was very bright. It was so bright that Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder could have had an argument over it. It was bad. It was bad. And my new friend Carrie went on archive.org and she found a slide. Yeah, let me set this up for him. Yeah, she found a slide. Now she's going to put it up there because we talked about this before, and I believe in doing stuff that's this fortuitous. But look, don't look directly into the image, okay? You might want to put your sunglasses on because this is bad. Go for it, Carrie. All right. Yeah, while she's putting it up here, I want to tell you, as bad as the website was, I was still able to sell amusement equipment because what I did was I got to the point where this is the best I can do right now. Let's focus on stuff I can change. And that meant recruiting new listings, telling people about the listings I had, sending people to the website pages where they could see the rides and buy the rides. And in the first year, I sold a simulator to a guy in Australia that sold for $50,000 used. In the second year, I sold a carousel for a mall in Georgia that was $125,000 used. The website worked because I didn't let the fact that, hey, I knew it was bad. This isn't a case where, yeah, go for it. Put it up there. Put it up there. This is good. This is what happens when you turn a blind guy loose with a color palette. And I really don't have a better story than this to show you what I'm talking about here, which is just because you don't think you're good enough yet doesn't mean you should hide your story. And those people who have yet to press send or yet to publish their first post, I want them to look at that picture and think, that website, as bad as that was, that sold thousands of dollars of amusement equipment. And trust me when I tell you this, selling used Carnival rides is probably the hardest job in this world, whether it's online or in person. It's not easy. In addition, I was a blind guy doing it, and I was the new guy in the business, and my business model was different than everybody else's because I was new. I was working on a commission sales basis. Everybody else had advertisers, and their websites were completely free. Just try telling people they have to pay you for something they're getting for free. You do that. That's never easy, but I did it because, like I said, I focused on what could I do. And eventually, what would happen is people would go, I've had my ride on so-and-so's site for a year. I haven't had the first bite. I haven't sold it. What do you say we let you give it a try? And when I would sell stuff, especially old, hard-to-place stuff, my reputation started to grow as somebody who could, find a home for the misfit rides, as my brother liked to call them. Yeah, in the early days, most of the stuff I got was only because they had tried other places and failed. And don't you know, I was very happy when I would succeed and they didn't. One of my favorite memories of all was when I sold a carousel, the one I mentioned in Georgia. It had been on the list for a company in Italy that had offices in Milan, Nashville, and Sydney. They had been trying to sell it for a year, and they're still mad at me for selling that ride. So that was what, 2008 we found out, which would have been the year after I got started. Later on, I would meet a great guy from Switzerland named Ashley Fox who would go, Max, I'm going to introduce you to WordPress. I'm going to help you move your website over, and we're going to make it much more traditional. It's going to be easier to use, but you're still going to be able to maintain it, which was one of the conditions I have had with every webmaster I've ever worked with, is whatever we do on my site, it has to be something that you can teach me how to do, given my limited skills and the fact I'm going to be doing it with a streamer. And so far, that has worked. There are some things that took a little more work than others to figure out how to explain them to me, but we did eventually get it. And of course, one of the worst parts was that I had created so many pages, like something like a couple of hundred pages under different categories, that just migrating all that stuff from HTML to WordPress was a big chore. I wouldn't recommend it. As bad as it is to go from Blogger to WordPress, I would never want to go from HTML to WordPress. It was, especially not on a big, I don't know if I can quite call my site an e-commerce site, but I guess that would be where it would fall. But yeah, that's proof there. If you work on what you can do something about, you focus on spreading the word, getting your name out there, you can be successful. Now, I'm not saying you should put out a crappy website. I'm not saying that but there comes a time when, if you don't know it, somebody in your community should say, hey, you've been talking about this long enough. It's pretty good. Yeah, it can be better, but you'll learn as you go. And for the most part, people out there online, they like to watch people's progress. They like to be able to relate to you, and one of the ways they can relate to you is they see you in the beginning. They see you when things aren't great. They watch you get better. They watch you learn various things, and they become fans and followers of you. I mean, in my case, when I built the email list by giving people free text links and managed to grow an email list of over 3,000 people worldwide, that was like a big deal to them. To me, it was not a big deal. To me, it was just another day of showing up and working my butt off to try to build a business. And quite often, that's the way I think of things. I don't really think of them as being as difficult as they are, because to me, it's just the next problem in front of me. Now, I do have a couple of other examples of when this has worked for me as far as not being perfect and maybe thinking it wasn't ready, but having it be a good outcome. When I decided to become the blind blogger, which I fought for 2 years because people told me I was inspirational, and I told them, no, you're talking about somebody else. They said, but Max, there are too many people out there in the world who don't have any physical disabilities. They don't have a reason why they're not doing something, but they're still sleepwalking through their days. They are still not challenging themselves, and they don't have an excuse. You have a perfect excuse to stay home, watch TV, and eat Cheetos if that's what you wanted to do, but you don't, and that's what makes your story important, and you have to share it. So when I decided to finally become the blind blogger, something I fought, and something a few blind people got mad at me for being willing to accept that name from people online who told me that was my name, I wrote a post called, I Think I'm Ready to Be an Inspiration. Now, I run 2 websites. One of them sells amusement equipment. One of them is motivational, coaching, writing books. Somehow, I got a picture of a really pretty part train engine confused with my profile photo. So my very first post says, I think I'm ready to be an inspiration. And what comes up at the top of the post with a picture of this huge part train engine. Thankfully, it was a gorgeous part train and not a hunk of junk part train, but because, if I'm going to mess it up, I could have messed it up a lot worse. the funny thing was, just to show how people will relate to you if you give them a chance by putting your stuff out there. Half the people who saw that post said, Max, did you know there was a train picture? The other half, though, said, Max, what an inspired idea. Most of us remember the little engine that could. What a great idea to put that picture of our train up there in a post titled, I think I'm ready to be an inspiration. This happened because most people out there online, if you give them a chance, they want to like you. They want to be educated or inspired or motivated by you. They want you to say something that helps them in some way, or say it in a way nobody else has said it before. And in my case, people thought that train was on purpose. I had to admit that it was on accident, but I didn't take the picture down. And if you go to theblindblogger.net and you look for that post, you'll still see that picture up there. Because I think it's important to remind people that our mistakes, especially happy accidents like that, they're just as much a part of who we are as when we get it right 99%. They really are. Another time this happened to me was when I decided to record my first video for the website. Now, I record in my room in an older house in Conroe, Texas, and I have light perception, but I have a very narrow field of vision, which means I can't see the light is on or off unless I'm looking at the light fixture. I sat down to record the video and didn't think to look to see if the lights were on or off, so I recorded this video in the dark. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And once again, half the people who saw it said, Max, did you know you were sitting in the dark? The title of the video was Leading You Out of the Darkness. The other half of the people said, Max, what a brilliant metaphor. To which I said, thank you, but that was all a happy accident. I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened to work out that way. But there again, what if I had decided to keep those posts back? What if somebody had told me, Max, you messed it up, and I took it down and fixed it? That would have robbed people of the message. And at least for me, my message is that it's better to go ahead and take action, no matter how small, no matter how successful or unsuccessful, because that's how we get from here to there. And I do my best to make an example of that, even when I mess up, even when I end up in what we used to call in the carnival business a jackpot, which is a bad but funny situation that you later retell for the entertainment of others, just in case y'all needed an explanation of what the word jackpot meant. And so sometimes I get myself into situations, but I usually will find a lesson out of them. Since I imagine most of y'all haven't read my post, last week I was speaking at another event and Amtrak lost my suitcase. But instead of being disappointed by that and the fact that it had my brand new suit in it and all my grooming products and my laptop and pretty much everything else that I own was in that suitcase, I went to the conference, I went to all the events, I met everybody, I shook hands, I had conversations, I participated in the contest, I won a free microphone. I gave my talk in 5-day-old blue jeans and a conference t-shirt. I was standing up there in something from Giorgio Armani, which I just recently learned who the heck that is. But because I decided that I was going to show up, I was going to do my best, I was going to give these people a lesson, a message, by the way I behaved in a bad situation, I managed to continue to embrace this whole thing about not making excuses, or if Max can do it, then what is my excuse? You know, and those are the kind of things that I share with people. A few years ago, I was promoting the new web marketplace, and I was thinking, I live in a suburb with no good transportation. I would really like to go meet people face to face, but that ain't happening. So what can I do about it? Next thing I know, a guy named Brian the Hammer Jackson is looking for people to come on his show on what he calls Small Business Friday. He's looking for business owners that want to come on and talk about what they do. And so I put my application in, and they picked me. I'm waiting there Friday morning with my old flip phone from Sprint, standing out in my garage where it's cold because I don't want to get interrupted by somebody else while I'm talking to them. And yeah, it does get cold in Houston in January, okay? And it comes time for me to go on. My phone dropped the call. While he's trying to call me back, I'm trying to call him back. We both got voicemail. He finally gets on the phone with me again. He goes, well, what are you, blind or something? And I said, well, yes, I am. At which point, we had about a minute and a half of silence, which for any of y'all who do podcasts is death. And then eventually I laughed about it, and then eventually he laughed about it. We had about another 5 or so minute conversation after that. He was so impressed by the way I handled it that he asked me to come back the next week, and I ended up coming on his show every week for about 6 months before I started doing other people's podcasts and radio shows, to the point now where people think of me as an expert in using podcasts and radio shows to promote their brand. And some people have even started hiring me to do that. That all started because I was stuck in my house and needed a way to get to people. And it was proof that even a bad show, even a bad talk, and the people who have spoke here before me this weekend, some of y'all know that. You walked off the stage and you're like, why was I here? You know, I hardly ever have that feeling, but I have heard about it. And people in the audience, though, a lot of them are looking for you to say something they can use. They want you to do well for the most part. That's one of the great things about the blogosphere, in my opinion, because there are so many helpful, supportive, encouraging people online, whether it be blogs, podcasts, videos. There's generally a community that we have where once you learn something, you're open to teaching it to people who haven't learned it yet. You know, so that's one of the things I really love about the blogosphere. And I've been very blessed to meet many people who have become part of my story because being open to meeting them online. But, you know, that was 6 years ago now. I did my first radio show. And 2 years ago, I talked a woman into doing a radio show, and she has now gone from being a woman who was afraid to share her writing in her home country to somebody who is now doing interviews. So I really enjoy helping other people, as it says in my bio. This week, I got here to WordCamp. I had the worst cold I've had in years. I wasn't sure I'd even be able to get up here and talk to y'all, so I'm very glad that that worked out. But if I'd had to come up here and squeak at you, I was going to do it. I really was. Now, I was going to put my book up here, but now I set it down. I'm not sure which way would be up, and I'm afraid that if I walk over there and get it, I'm going to end up in somebody's lap. But the book is called The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures and How You Can Make Your Dreams Come True. And it's another case where if I had went off of what I felt about myself at the time, I wouldn't have done it. Because when I went to their website, it's a competition where they pick 24 people a year out of thousands of people based on their writing, to go on an Amtrak trip somewhere in the U.S. and hopefully spark their writing juices so they can create a book, a play, collection of poems, short stories, whatever. When I found out about it, I went to the website and I looked at their website. And I read some of the bios of the previous winners. And I started seeing plays nominated for awards, best-selling books, people with publishing deals with traditional publishing companies instead of self-published. Before long, I was starting to think, you know, Max, this is like that old Sesame Street song, and which one of these is not like the other, and I'm the fourth guy in that square. And I almost talked myself out of it until I got to the point where I read a woman's blog, a woman's comment, and she said that if you were taking people who weren't already successful and established, I would apply. And that made me feel really sad for her, and it made me think, Max, I don't want to be that person. I don't want anybody to be that person, that they'd be afraid to submit their work and take their chances, even if they feel like they're not worthy. So I filled out the application. I submitted it along with part of my first book, and they selected me out of thousands of people without even thinking we're going to send a blind guy to New York City by himself. I think if they had known that in advance, they might have thought different before it was over with. We'll never know. But I've had a great time every time I've been here in New York City. The point there, though, is if you wait until you feel like you're worthy, you're never going to do it. Your website's never going to go live. Your first post is never going to be out there. You know, I have made a living on taking chances, on putting myself out there maybe when I wasn't ready. Many times I wasn't. But a lot of times I thought to myself, how will I know? A lot of times my daddy used to tell me all the time, he would say, Max, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. And you know, I've tried to live that. In some cases, I would have been better if after they said yes, I said no. But, we don't always make the best decisions in the moment. But I tell you, the worst decision is to not put your work out there online. It may not be great. It probably isn't. As a matter of fact, I've never met a webmaster who was happy with their website. I've never met one yet who, if you asked them seriously, they wouldn't tell you that I need a new theme. This one doesn't do X for me. Or my content is horrible, or nobody really wants to read what I have to share. I wouldn't be a bit surprised because I've never met a webmaster who was happy. I've never met an author that was happy. Every time an author sends a book off to be published or submits it to an online site like Amazon or Smashwords or Barnes & Noble, they all have that moment where they're scared to death that nobody's going to like their book, that nobody's going to want to read it, and that people will even say, what business do you have writing a book? And those fears never go away. No matter how many times you publish a blog post, record a video, no matter how many times you publish, it never goes away. About 3 years ago, I started my podcast, What's Your Excuse? I was encouraged to do it by a guy named Frederick Bai, who's a real good friend of mine. He said, Max, come on the show. I'll be your co-host. You won't have to worry about any of the tech, and we'll be fine. So I did that. And for a year later, he calls me up and goes, Max, I can't be there today. I want you to do the show by yourself. So at the last minute, I'm like, how do I do the show? How do I record the show? And so in the space of about 4 hours, I signed up for Zoom, tested Zoom, used Zoom to record an interview with a guy named Michael Schwartz, who's a filmmaker from California that's losing his vision. Put out a great podcast, even though neither one of us was sure it was in focus. Got a lot of great comments on it because of the content, because of the interview. Questions to people on the talk. Now, I know some people are going to say, Max, maybe you get a pass because you're blind. And I've had that discussion. And I think that while there may be sometimes I get a little better result than other people would because they're blind, but instead I think it's more that I have a unique story. I'm a former carnival owner. I'm an amusement equipment broker. I'm a totally blind guy who doesn't understand the dangers of traveling by himself anywhere in the world if the opportunity comes along. I like to tell people I'm not smart enough to be scared, and some days people correct me on that, and some days they don't. But I keep doing the next thing. And the next thing for me this week was WordCamp here in New York. The next thing after this is WordCamp in Pittsburgh. And after that, I really don't know what the next thing is because a lot of times people ask me that. It's my least favorite question. They ask me, what's next? What you going to do next? And I always tell them, I don't really know what I'm going to do next because I've found that it's best if I don't put limits on God. I find that oftentimes his dreams are bigger than mine, and sometimes his obstacles are bigger than mine. And I like to tell people, he may give you a gift that says batteries included or some assembly required, but he will help you assemble it. Now, I think I'm a little short on time. I think I'm getting close, but I think if it's okay with y'all, we'll go ahead and do some questions now. And please don't anybody raise their hand. Just go to the mic, and we'll take whoever gets there first. See there, we have described audio. We didn't even plan it.
First of all, I want to thank you because I'm working on a website for my brother who was blind. He was an artist and a sculptor, and he died in March. And so I have been working, trying to put it up to all of my brothers and sisters who want his art to be seen by people. And here's a man who his eyesight had 17% acuity.
Yeah.
And it was like, he described it as looking at things through a straw. And the work that he did was incredible. So I want to thank you for encouraging me to get his website up and running.
Right. One thing to remember about a website like that is when you're dealing with something where you're going to have a lot of images, a lot of art to describe and make sure it's rendered properly, There's nothing wrong with posting one item, one series. A lot of people, if they get in the middle of a project like that and they're like, well, when I get it all done, then I'll have it go live. But a lot of people are going to come back to the website or going to find the website for the first time after you've started that process. Meanwhile, you're getting indexed in Google and other search engines, and people are starting to find out about the site. They're starting to bookmark the site. They're starting to talk about the site. And then by the time you get everything up there, those people who liked it are going to come back and look at the things they didn't see yet.
Well, we have this homepage up.
Good.
And we were able to get a small showing in San Diego. That's our hometown. So that's on the homepage. So that people see a little bit of this stuff. And then I'm working on the Metropolitan series, which is 15 days. So each time a case is finished, I kind of pull onto that.
That's great.
You have encouragement.
Well, I will say this, you're unusual because a lot of people still wouldn't be doing it in that process. People get funny ideas in their heads when they're building a site like that. And I would say reach out to the people at the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind because they are very big on supporting projects like that. Yeah, the man you want to talk to is William Butler. You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. One of the ways I promote my podcast is by appearing on other people's radio shows and podcasts. Because I find that they often have audiences I don't have, and that many of their fans are loyal supporters of their work and will support my site, visit the site, and share the site because their friend, the person that they listen to and like, has suggested they listen to me because I came on their show. That's one of the top things I do. Beyond that, the usual social media stuff, which I hate. I especially hate Facebook because, in my opinion, it changes way too often for its own good. And I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. If I ever meet Zuckerberg in the street, he's going down. And I don't care who tells him. Because really, that site changes so much, so often, and most of the time for very little reason. See, even the sighted people agree with me on that. Okay.
Hi, Max. It's Bud Krause, and
Bud.
you and I have had a chance to chat yesterday. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say something that I normally don't say in public, but I'm visually impaired and I don't see very well, and you know that.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to even admit to that or say that publicly because. But anyway, so thank you for coming, and I want you to. I took a trip this year around the United States. And I went on 19 days around the country, going on Amtrak. And it was difficult for a visually impaired person to do a trip like that. So you mentioned travel. And do you want to talk, I know this is not a WordPress question, but I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about some of the challenges and difficulties that you have navigating airports and stuff like that. So whatever comes to your mind, please go ahead and share.
Yeah. All right, well, as you know, I'm a big fan of Amtrak, mainly because they allowed me to take my first real trip 2 years ago. And in my opinion, if you're blind and you're going to be traveling to cities and you're traveling there for conferences or speaking events, usually via Amtrak, you're going to end up closer to the event than you will if you take the plane. That's for the most part. And I find for me personally, I find it harder to get from the train or the plane station to the venue or the hotel than I do to get from city to city. So I prefer to end up as close to where I want to go as possible. For example, last week when I went to Philadelphia, there were some problems and I didn't end up doing it, but I could have taken a local train from the Philadelphia Amtrak station to within a couple of blocks of the hotel where I was going to be staying. Somebody who flew into the airport in the same city paid almost $50 to Uber. And if they paid that to Uber, they would have probably paid over $100 to a taxi. So me, as a blind person traveling, especially traveling solo without a wife, girlfriend, or paid assistant, I try to look at things in the overall way, because traveling by train is more expensive than traveling by plane, but only if you can drive. If you can afford, if you're in a position to drive a rental car when you get to town, then you have an advantage over me when it comes to making the schedule. So me, I would prefer to take the train. It's going to be a little longer. It's going to be a little more expensive. I also find the staff on the train more attentive and friendlier than I have found the staff on airplanes. And the final thing is, I'm 6'4.5" tall, 270 pounds. I do not like cramming my butt into airplane seats. But once you get to the place where you're going, there's a new app that's being tested in the San Francisco airport that will allow you to connect your smartphone to a system of beacons that will allow you to navigate the entire airport. There's that same system is supposed to be in the process of being installed at Penn Station and Union Station here in Grand Central, here in New York. And the reason they're doing it is because GPS doesn't work so well indoors, but they've found out that this beacon system can work. And the interesting thing is the tests that they've done on it in California, the sighted people are liking it even better than the blind people, because they can go from wherever they are in the airport to wherever they need to go, including, reservation desks, baggage pickup, and even finding the restrooms much more easily. So they've been testing it there for a couple of years now, and I don't know why it hasn't gone more mainstream yet, but that's, I should mention that I'm kind of a low-tech person. I have blind friends. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not the only blind blogger or podcaster, but I have blind friends who are much more adept at the tech side of it, and they use their GPS more than I do. I was having a discussion with somebody earlier this morning about this whole idea of independence versus interdependence, and I know there are a lot of blind people who are very passionate about their independence, and I tend to be on the other end of the scale and think that life is better the more that you interact with people and the more you allow people to be part of your story. So I'm not what you'd call a real out there blind person when it comes to traveling. I would much rather get from here to there with a friendly word, a smile, a handshake, and asking nicely, as opposed to depending on the tech, because both can break down. You can be disappointed by people and tech equally.
Hi, Max. Thank you so much. I appreciated your sharing your first website with us. That was very inspiring, because it helped me, because I'm one of those perfectionists who gets stopped by, well, if it's not perfect, it doesn't exist. But I'm just wondering, how did you negotiate your first podcast? Like, what did you do in terms of equipment and that?
Okay, well, my first radio show was done over the phone. My first podcast, as far as recording it, we recorded it using Skype, and my friend Frederick recorded it on his end. Since then, I have switched to using Zoom, because Zoom has a built-in recording feature that Skype never offered. You had to purchase a third-party app to record your Skype conversations, and to me, I'm one of these in-the-moment kind of people. When I'm having an interview, I have to be focused on the conversation, not worrying about whether or not I'm being recorded or being broadcast, or are my sound levels good. I'm kind of a press record, press stop kind of person. And I like the fact that Zoom has keyboard commands for everything, like the woman who gave the accessibility talk was mentioning yesterday. They have keyboard commands for everything, and in many cases they have spoken word commands. And like I say, that record function where I can depend on it recording and just focus on the conversation is great. And of all the people I pay every month to keep myself online, the only person I don't complain about is Zoom. I don't mind that $16 change I send them every month, because it gives me so much peace of mind in return for it. And when you figure that after you record it, if you want, you can give somebody, say you can give the editor or you can give an assistant the link to where you recorded it. They can download it and post it for you. You can give that link to the person who was on the interview with you, and they can download it to their website and have it in their library for future use. The scheduling of meetings on Zoom used to be a little quirky, but it's gotten much better. And like WordPress, they have a sincere, total commitment to accessibility. So that's another reason. One thing I should mention to anybody who saw the talks on accessibility or who has been wondering about accessibility, in general, as a group, blind people are very loyal audiences, very loyal consumers. We will even overpay if we feel like the person providing the service or selling the product has real concern about our needs and desires. So when you go out of your way to make your site available to somebody who's blind or other people with disabilities, you're making it available for people that, if they like you, they're going to stay with you. They're going to tell other people to come see you. That's just the way we are as a group, because there are so few people in the world who go out of their way to make us feel welcome like that, especially online. Did I answer your question? All right, thank you.
Hi, I don't know if you already answered this because I came a little bit late. But can you recommend when we are because I'm the kind of person who do content. What would be some ideas for a site? You know, like how long you think is good for a content, or how short?
What kind of site do you have?
Well, at the moment I'm designing one because I'm a freelance journalist.
Okay.
So I write a lot. So I don't know how much is too much, or if I'm describing it in a certain way.
All right. When it comes to blog content, there really is no set length that's going to work. Some people do very well with 500-word posts. Some people do very well with 2,000-word posts. What it's about is finding a consistent length that you're comfortable for producing on a regular basis. I mean, if you can't sustain 2,500-word posts, then don't write 20. But if you can sustain that, then that'll become part of your brand. That'll become part of the reason why people visit your site and why they read your work. Just remember that if you're going to write long posts, you need to break it up with headers, links, photos, videos, paragraph breaks, blank space. Just break it up really good if you're going to write long posts. And then one other thing about length. I have a good friend named Ryan Bedulf. He's known as the Blogger from Paradise. And he used to write really long posts, over 2,000, sometimes over 5,000 words. And he finally decided that the smart thing to do was to stop writing long posts and start writing ebooks. So at some point you have to ask yourself, are you giving people so much of yourself that you really should be charging them in the form of an ebook, or you should be creating an ebook and exchanging it for email addresses or something along those lines? So just ask yourself, what can you do on a weekly basis? How many posts can you write? How many words would those posts be? And what is sustainable? And when you take into account whatever your current schedule is, and then leave some extra time for fun or for things to not go the way you expected them to go. One of my doctors says, Max, when you feel like working, work your butt off. When you don't feel like it, rest, do something fun, or sleep. Yeah, I like him. He's a good doctor. He doesn't yell at me about anything. He's one of those guys who thinks that a positive approach to life is very important to staying healthy. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
I hope that helps. I know figuring out the interval between posts and the length of posts is a hard thing to do. And the one thing I would say that I'm totally against is daily posting, unless you're just going to write really short posts. Any more questions? Sure. Yeah. All right. I would say think about the importance of the image. What is the image trying to convey, and what are you hoping to get out of the image? Because if that image is attached to a link, and the goal is to get me to buy something from you, then I want a lot of alt text. If that image is your header image, and I'm going to see it often, I really don't want or need as much alt text. So I would say that's a good place to start. As far as description, I think that since there are varying levels of vision acuity, you should include colors, but I would avoid vague terms like hunk, chunk, lot. Try to use specific terms, even amounts, weights, distances, if they apply to the picture that you're describing. So I would say that I personally, I like a good amount of alt text, especially if it's a complicated image, or like I say, if the image is tied to you want me to buy something from you. Now, one thing I did just remember, and I hope nobody's doing this. Facebook has recently started doing image recognition, where they will tell the screen readers what the image is. Now, there are three problems with that. One, sometimes Facebook can't determine the image at all, and it'll tell you no text available. Two, it will describe the image, and the description is nowhere near specific enough. My favorite one recently was, it said one person eating a plate of Mexican food. It didn't tell me, are we talking tacos or tamales or enchiladas or... And I would have liked to have known that because, to me, there's a difference. To me, there's a difference. And the third problem with it is I'm really afraid that webmasters and blog owners are going to start dropping the alt tag, especially when they post to social media, because they feel like they can depend on Facebook and other social media platforms to bail them out on that. That I am really afraid of that happening. And with the new image recognition on the iPhones and the other iOS devices, I'm kind of worried about it happening there too. And one other thing about alt tags that I don't know that anybody's talked about this week. The best thing about alt tag is not only does it help the blind, but it also helps the search engines find your photos. So don't forget that alt tag isn't just a penalty. It isn't just a burden you do for people like me. It's something you do so Google and Yahoo and those people can find your website and send people to it. And I find once I put it that way to most website owners, they're like, it can drive traffic, we're going to do it. Well, I've seen people who do hour-long podcasts or 2-hour-long radio shows that do just fine. I've seen people who do 15-minute podcasts that are great. I've heard of podcasts that go an hour and they start tracking their stats and they notice nobody's listening past the first 15 minutes. A lot of it depends on the personality of the host and the guest, the subject matter, the audience. And one of the things you can do is you can try different lengths. You can follow your stats on whatever podcasting platform you're using, and you can see what is it that people like. You can also use your email list to reach out to people and go, we've been thinking that an hour might be too long, or that every 5 days a week is too often, or that once a month might be good enough. And you ask them, what do they need? What do they want? My show lasts about an hour, depending on the guest, because some guests are great guests, like me, that answer questions far beyond the question that was asked and fill time for hosts, which is one of the reasons why I keep getting booked, I think. And there are other guests who every answer is 3 words or less, and you spend the whole time wondering, when is this going to end? So it depends a lot on the guest, the host, and I would say that in general, unless you're doing a radio broadcast, which is, I know most of the radio is online radio now, and it's archived so it can be listened to on demand, but in my opinion, if you're doing something that's going out live, then you can go longer than an hour and have it work for you. But I don't know of a whole lot of shows, radio or podcasts, that go more than 60 minutes. So I would say that's probably the top end of the ideal length. Well, I recently stopped posting my audio because it was getting to be too much of an aggravation to go through the steps of getting my audio out on a podcasting platform. I've since decided that I'm going to hire a virtual assistant to do that for me, and so we're going to get it back out on. I use a platform called Podomatic, which is a pretty respectable free platform. I get a lot of grief for this, but I use the video camera and the microphone built into my laptop, or built into the iPhone or the iPad. In most cases, the video and audio quality is just fine, especially for podcasting. The real question is lighting keeping your image and the image of your guests in focus, sound quality based on the equipment you do have, because I've recorded some great shows using a Plantronics 2468, which is by no means top-of-the-line equipment. I recently won a Audio-Technica ATR 2100, and I'm actually looking forward to recording my first podcast with a real microphone. And I can't tell you how many times last week I would tell somebody, they'd ask me, well, how do you record your show? And I'm like, the built-in equipment? And they would look at me like, man, there's something wrong with you. I felt, I don't usually feel awkward or less than other people. I usually feel like if they're farther along in their journey, that's fine. If they do things different than me, that's fine. But it's one of the few areas where I felt like, they're basically saying, Max, we can't believe you're trying to do a good podcast and get yourself out there and you're using the built-in microphone off of a 5-year-old MacBook. So I would say if you can afford the equipment, that's fine, but there's no reason to have it, especially when you're starting out. I'm sure many of y'all have seen sitcom episodes where parents have that conversation with their kids about them wanting to play soccer or learn the guitar, and they're like, let's find out if you like it before we spend any real money. I would say do the same thing with your podcasting. Find out if you like it. Are you going to be able to sustain it before you invest any money in expensive equipment? Because you can get started. You can develop an audience with the equipment you probably already own. The real key is, if you're going to do video, look at your lighting. If you're not sure that you know what looks good as far as lighting goes, then have somebody look at it for you. Record a sample video and post it on your social media and go, hey, if I did this in this lighting, what would you think? And of course, I really should have done that myself, but I didn't. I was so happy that I was in focus, I didn't care if the lights were on or not. Because that is one of the things I worry about. One of my recent, most fun podcast interviews, I was interviewing a blind author who's just as blind as I am. So we basically just said, if we're in focus, fine. If we're not in focus, fine. We're just going to go ahead and have our interview. And the funny thing is, there again, people were like, we're so impressed that two blind people would use a visual medium like posting a YouTube video. So I would say the other thing is check your audio and make sure, because people can turn your volume down, but they cannot turn your volume up beyond a certain point. And I can't tell you how many times I have quit a video because it was either too soft or it was too loud and there wasn't an obvious way for me to turn the volume down. I mean, sometimes as a blind person, you get stuck in that loop trying to hear through the music and try to find those quiet spots in a rock tune so you can find that button to turn it off. Yeah. That's all the time. Okay, so she's telling me I'm down to 2 minutes, right? Yeah, okay.
Oh, quickly, Max, hello. Thank you for being here today. I just wanted to say that starting out in blogs or social media, trying to establish oneself is sometimes that I'm exhausted. It's more, fear is added to it, but exhaustion is also there. So when you started out, you said you started out with your website, which is pretty good if I started myself. Yeah. And then from there, you sort of...
From there, I started, right. Yeah, I added the blog and then social media and then email list. I would say do what I recently did. Evaluate everything you're doing for your blog and find out things that you're doing because other people say you should do them. Right. There could be things in there that you're doing that don't serve your purpose at all and that are wearing you out. That was my problem with the audio from my interview.
Right. So, I want to be a lifestyle blogger, and then people say, oh, go to YouTube, and then you have your Instagram account and podcast. Right.
Yeah, well, I wasn't on 6 social media networks all at once. I started with Facebook and then moved to LinkedIn and then to Twitter. And that's the way you have to do it. You have to find one thing and do it well for a while, and then see if you have time to do other things.
I hope you can put me on your show one day. Thank you.
Well, go to theblindblogger.net and send me an email and remind me who you are, and we'll see if maybe knowing that you could be a guest on my show will get you to the point where you either post your blog or post more often from it.
So Zuli Rodriguez, her WordPress, WordPress Camp 2018. Thank you. Yay! I got my first.
Okay, I appreciate it. I hope that in my own way I have inspired some of y'all to either post for the first time or post more often or share more openly. And while I don't feel good, I'm going to try to end this the way I thought about it in my mind before I came up here. I want y'all to listen to these next words and think about them as you leave or as you hear the next speaker. Too many times we stand aside and let the water slip away, till what we put off to tomorrow has finally come today. So don't stand upon the shoreline and say you're satisfied. Choose to chance the rapids, dare to dance the tide. That's all you're going to get today, because that's all my voice will. Yeah.